So although all of these jobs needed doing, we would all have shared them. It wouldn't necessarily be your own parents looking after you. There was much more of a communal environment where everybody helped everybody else. And because these societies had to hunt for the food that they needed, they would often move around. So they were what we would call nomadic societies. They moved from place to place. But they always shared their jobs and shared their roles. And for Durkheim, he said that this made them very similar to each other. So for Durkheim, a really important concept or idea is solidarity. Okay, solidarity. And I'm going to ask you what you think that means, but I'm going to give you a couple of hints. So another word that some sociologists use is social cement, and another word is social glue. Okay, so can you have a guess for me what you think solidarity might mean? And just pop it in the chat box for me if you think you know. Thank you. Really nice ideas coming through. Okay, so we have the idea of unity. Really good word. It just sums it all up. We're all in this together. Harmony, agreement within people. Fantastic. You've all got the idea. Okay, so solidarity for Durkheim is definitely feeling unified, all coming together as one. Okay, and it's really important, he says, it's really important that we feel that we are all part of something that's much bigger, part of a community, part of a society. And he also emphasized that idea of agreement. So well done people who said agreement, because he actually said that consensus or agreement is the whole way of society together. We feel social solidarity because we all agree this is how it's supposed to be. Okay, so for Durkheim, he saw the importance of something that happened in the 17 and 1800s that really changed society. Do you know what that was? What happened in the 17 and 1800s that changed society? Thank you. Yes, industrialization. There are lots of things happening in the 17 and 1800s, but industrialization is one of the key changes to society. And Durkheim identifies this because he says that the growth of technology is the reason why people start to specialize. So another concept that he uses is specialization. As technology develops, some people can use it better than others. So some people move into particular roles and other people have other roles. So this process of specialization, as he calls it, starts to create a different society. It changes the shape of society. Whereas in a hunter-gatherer society, we might have lots of people doing different jobs, but they would all move around and share their roles, and they would all be on the same level, and everyone got to play a part in the society. Durkheim says, with technology comes specialization, and actually society changes. And we start to see a society that is much more of a hierarchy. So you've got on your screen now a bit of a pyramid, a hierarchy, And he starts to say that society now relies on interdependence, okay? Interdependence. The idea that you've got someone in charge at the top and they own everything. They own everything. Now, in return for services, they give some of that stuff as gifts. So for the nobles underneath, they would have to swear their loyalty to the king, and they would have to employ soldiers who then work for them to protect the king and his nation. In return, the king gives the nobles land. For the soldiers who fight for the nobles give the soldiers land. Now, everyone's got a piece of land. What are they going to do with it? So anyone else in society needs to be working on the land. Now, down here at the bottom of the hierarchy, they don't own anything, but they are farming the land so that everyone else can eat. They are making things, including weapons and houses, so that everyone has the material goods that they need. So from Durkheim's point of view, although you might have someone sitting at the top who is in charge of everything, actually everyone plays their role in society, and even without these people at the bottom of the hierarchy, society wouldn't work. So everyone has their role to play, and that means there is interdependence. So from Durkheim's point of view, we go from a situation where we feel solidarity and unity because we're all in a very similar situation together, to feeling solidarity and unity because we all know that we're working for the greater good of society. We all have our role to play, and we're all relying on different people to do their different roles because we can't do everything ourselves. So you have some people who make things, some people who grow food, other people set the laws, other people fight and protect everybody else. So this is Durkheim's idea of society and how it changes. And what he's identifying here is really the emergence of the nation state. And once you get somebody in charge, they start to be very protective over their territory. So what you can see on the map here is that obviously in the UK, we are very protective about our territory. And you can see these slightly thicker black lines that indicate where one country finishes and another begins. And even though in the UK, the government and parliament are all situated in England, if England tried to change the boundaries of Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland, it wouldn't work because the people in Scotland would be very protective over their boundary. People in Wales, people in Ireland would be very protective over their territory. So actually, if we return to that idea of society as a group of people who share a culture and a territory, we can see that culture and territory actually do play their very important parts, okay? Even though we might have relationships that cross boundaries, territory and borders are still important to those in charge and those living on the borders and around them. Even though we might have slightly different cultures in different parts of a country, or even the UK made up of 4 different countries, slightly different cultures, but still, as some of you said, a sense of being British, Britishness, having a British identity. So there's still something shared as well. Now, with Durkheim, he sees everything fitting together, working together nicely. There's consensus, agreement, everyone thinks this is how it should be, and we all play our roles to create society. However, there are other social theorists who argue against this, and what we're going to do is just identify some of the similarities and differences between these different theories. So rather than society being defined by the nation state and everybody's consensus and interdependence. Some sociologists believe that society is driven by something else. They believe that society is driven by the economy. So actually, the economy creates the shape of society. It drives any social change that happens. So I'm just going to give you a few seconds. Can you think of anyone in particular who argues that society is shaped by the economy? Okay, suggestions are starting to come through. I'll give you a few more seconds, see if you can come up with anyone else. Thank you. So we've had is that Darwin? Yeah, and Fisa, I think you're mentioning Charles Darwin. So yes, I suppose there are economic forces associated there, but I suppose he was more about along with Herbert Spencer, talking about adaptation. So how do we adapt? How do lots of different species adapt to their surroundings? Anna suggests Trump, Donald Trump. Certainly currently, Donald Trump might argue that the economy is one of the most important features in society. I'm going to give you a little picture clue, see if you recognise this person. You might have seen this very impressive beard before. Thank you, well done, Anfisa. Yes, okay, so Karl Marx was alive between 1818 and 1883. It feels like a long time ago now, but his life overlapped with Durkheim. So they were both seeing a lot of the same things, and they're both born as the Industrial Revolution or industrialization really starts to take shape, take effect. And both of them are witnessing some of the impacts of industrialization. But one of the key differences between Durkheim and Marx is that Durkheim sees things in a very positive way, whereas Marx identifies much more conflict in society. So we often refer to Durkheim as a consensus sociologist. He sees agreement and consensus everywhere, whereas Marx we call a conflict sociologist. He sees conflict and disruption and often inequality everywhere. So for Karl Marx, he identified certain stages in society's evolution, and he believed very firmly that all societies would evolve eventually in similar ways. So all societies, he argued, started off with that very communal society, okay? So this might be the hunter-gatherers that Durkheim was talking about. And I've put a nice little selection of vegetables there because they would be foraging for their food, growing their food, sharing their food. Most importantly, everyone would have the resources that they need in that kind of society. So this might be a little bit of again, a romantic view of the past. But the idea was that everyone shared the jobs, the responsibilities, and the resources. For Karl Marx, he also agreed that society would evolve because of the economic forces within it. So he believed that eventually we would get that hierarchy with someone in charge And then he identified what was happening in his own time and the industrial society that had grown around him. And because factories need workers, he identified that many people left those traditional communal societies in the countryside and moved to the cities where the factories were in order to get work. And they were attracted there by the idea of a stable income, a regular income. Their wages would be the same every week or every month, and they wouldn't have to worry about whether their crops lasted or whether terrible weather damaged the food that they were trying to grow. So people were attracted to the cities in order to work in the factories, but also factories have owners, people who have enough money to establish the factories. And from Marx's point of view, although the workers do all the work, the profits are often taken by the factory owners. And for him, this created an unequal society, lots of conflict and tension between the people who own the factories and the people who work in the factories. And again, we've got that hierarchy, people at the top, people at the bottom. And this is what we call a capitalist society, people who own, people who work, okay? And what he believed is that every society would eventually work its way through these stages, through capitalism, and eventually out the other side to a much more equal society, okay? Where again, we would share the resources much more equally. We would all perhaps work in a more specialised way. We wouldn't all be growing food and living communally, but we would work according to our skills and strengths and have the resources that we all needed. So for Karl Marx, in order for this to happen, some kind of revolution needed to take place where the workers realised how unequal society was, and they rose up against those factory owners and took control of society. So whereas Durkheim said that we all needed to feel solidarity, and technology helps society to change, for Karl Marx, it's those conflicts within society that push us on to the next stage of social evolution. And Fisa has mentioned the concept of communism in the chat box, and absolutely, for Karl Marx, an equal society was communism, okay? So the idea where all the resources are shared, all the wealth is pooled and shared. Okay, before we move on, I just want to get a few ideas from you. Although Durkheim and Marx have different ideas about society and how it changes, can you tell me any similarities between the two theories? I will give you a couple of minutes to think. Pop your ideas in the chat box, please. And I just want to check your understanding a little bit. Similarities between Durkheim and Marx, please. Thank you. We've got a couple of answers coming through. So Anna says that hierarchy is one of the similarities. Absolutely. They both see that society is structured in a hierarchical way. Although they see it, you know, Durkheim sees it in a much more positive way, Marx sees it in a much more negative way, much more conflict going on between the different levels of the hierarchy. Thank you. Also, they both wanted a fair society for all. I'm sure that they did. They had very different ideas about what was fair. So for Durkheim, he would have argued that all of us have the opportunity to be anything we want. And, you know, we live more sort of in his time, he's not thinking of past societies, but from his time onwards, he would have argued we all have the capacity to work our way up and get where we want to go. Whereas Karl Marx would say, actually, there are lots of barriers that some people face, and it's not easy for everybody to get where they want to go. So for some people, it can feel as if you're kept at the bottom of society all the time. Fantastic ideas though. Both believed that we have our place, yeah, our function, our specialisation in society. Thank you very much, Anna. You have given me the perfect link into my next slide, because we are going to talk about specialisation. Well done, you. So yeah, the ideas of hierarchy are shared, the ideas of society. For Durkheim, society is fair. For Karl Marx, society should be fair. And if we all evolve through that sequence of stages, we will get there. And the idea that we all have our function and role to play is also something that's shared between them. For Durkheim, this is based on our consensus, our agreement. For Karl Marx, maybe we all have our role to play, but we don't always have a choice about what that role is. And we might not really like it. We might find it very unfair. So if we have a quick think about specialisation, I only want to spend a few minutes on this, but I just want to think about what happens inside a society. And for both of our theorists at the moment, specialisation takes place. So I just thought you might want to have a go at guessing what I mean by these icons down the bottom of the slide. And I know that some of you should all be able to access an annotate button. So if you might need to click on more and then annotate, but you should be able to write or type onto the screen. So you can have a little text box here. So if you want to put some ideas in the chat box, then please do, if you're more comfortable doing that. If you want to have a go at annotating on here, you could choose one of these icons and put your idea just above it. What do I mean by these little icons at the bottom of the slide? Nothing rude on the screen, please. I will take it off. Okay, so question in the chat box. These icons mean there are different roles in society. Yes, Anfisa, if you want to have a guess at what I mean by these icons. So for example, this little person here, what am I trying to say? What is one of the specialised roles in society? So they could mean multiple things, I guess. I've got an idea of what I think they are, but you might think something different. Everyone has their own place, yes. Okay, all right, so yeah, for example, Anna's popped in the text box, education. Good, okay, so we could have education above this icon, a little graduation hat that you've got. But even within education, we have different roles. You have teachers, you have students, everyone has their role to play. So you've got different people going on in there. Okay, so we've got family. All right. Very good. Motherhood, good. It could very specifically be mothers, yeah. Someone's having a go at writing, fantastic. So we've got medicine over here. We've got our little ambulance over here, haven't we, with the medics or the emergency services. Well done. Anything else? Government, yeah, you can finish writing if you, I don't mind if you go over my typing, that's fine. Government. Excellent. Thank you. Well done. Your writing is much more clearer than mine. I have to type. I can't do writing. Traveling. Okay, so we've got travel. Excellent. We can have travel here. Or transport. All right, give me a couple more. What do I mean over here? On the end. Religion. Fantastic. Very good. Music. All right. So what would the role be for music? You say music or art. What would your role be? Entertainment, thank you. Okay, so yeah, so music, art, hobbies, that all comes under entertainment, doesn't it? So some people have a very specialized role in entertainment. Okay. Okay, developing a sense of beauty. I'm not sure which icon you're talking about, but yeah, definitely we have a sort of beauty industry, don't we? Okay, a very cheerful death scrawled across the middle of the screen. Actually, that is what I was thinking with that icon. So yeah, we have death. We have people who specialize in roles to do with death. So people who look after dead bodies when we die. People who have to arrange the ceremonies and the funerals that take place. And we might even have the dead as part of our social hierarchy. They might be given a particular status in society. So we've got a couple more coming on. Kamola says minerals or mining at the end. Yeah, yeah, fantastic. So these sort of raw materials and minerals that we would mine for. We've left out our little sports person just so that they don't feel left out. I'm going to put sports there. Okay, thank you. So my point is that we very clearly we have specialized roles in society, but in Durkheim's society, who would have the top position? For Durkheim, who is the most important in that hierarchy? Who's at the top? Yeah, government, okay, or the person in charge, the king, the ruler, whoever you want to say, yeah, the president, the government, the people in charge, okay? For Karl Marx, who should be in charge? All of us, okay? Who's going, yeah, the people, who's going to establish that fair community, that fair society? For Karl Marx, a particular group of people in society have a special status. Workers, thank you very much. Okay, so it's the workers who are going to get frustrated with the inequalities of society. They are going to start establishing a more equal society according to Karl Marx, and these are all just theories. Okay, what I would like us to do is just to oh, sorry, all our drawings out the way. Okay, just to clarify one more idea of Durkheim, and then we will ask the question whether we still have a society. So for Durkheim, if you have that person at the top, that ruler, that king, president, leader, government, it suddenly becomes much more obvious to everybody else that society has a hierarchy and is unequal. And it might cause problems in society if you start to indicate to people that actually not everyone has the same position. We have different statuses. So for Durkheim, you have to maintain that sense of social solidarity, keeping everyone feeling as if they are part of the same community, part of a society. And we do that through institutions, rituals, and shared memories. So I've popped onto the screen some of the UK's rituals and shared memories, and I wonder if you can identify them. We've already had one of them mentioned already. See if you can identify the UK's rituals and shared memories. What do you think the pictures represent? Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so we definitely love our tea. We love our tea in the UK. All kinds of different tea. That is one of the rituals that we enjoy, and we like having tea by ourselves, with our friends, at work, at home. In the morning, you've said afternoon tea. That's a very special ritual, and we have that as a bit of a treat because it usually involves some cakes and sandwiches. You've also identified Christmas, thank you. And Christmas comes from some of our institutions. So some of our key institutions that are shared across the world, not just the UK, but obviously we have school as an institution, we have the media, and we have church. And Christmas comes from one of our religions, okay? So even if you're not particularly religious in the UK, you might still celebrate Christmas because it's just good fun. So Christmas is a great ritual that used to be religious, but isn't, you know, always religious anymore. It's a very widespread custom. And then some of you have suggested war down here with our pictures of planes, World War I and World War II. Well done, it is World War II. And a very specific shared memory is a particular battle that took place in World War II. Can you guess which battle I'm talking about? Thank you, well done, straight away, the Battle of Britain. So my picture here is actually an image of the aeroplanes that were used, the very famous Spitfires and Hurricanes that were used in the Battle of Britain. And actually every year we still remember the Battle of Britain by sending some of these really old planes up into the sky. And the pilots that fly them are really brave because these are very old machines now, and they still fly in the air and do loops in the sky, and we still really enjoy seeing and hearing them. We've also had a comment from Anna about war and sharing our memories of heroes and victories. but also disasters. So obviously war is a terrible thing with lots of death, and I'm not suggesting that we celebrate that over here in the UK, but we certainly remember it. And some of those events are associated with victory, even though there's a very high cost. So I've listed down the side the types of institutions that exist in all kinds of societies across the world, but also the way that we can identify the rituals and shared memories. And you might want to think about some of your own rituals and shared memories in your own countries, if they're outside the UK. And you don't have to tell me them, but I just want you to be thinking about them. Can you identify some of the equivalent things that happen in your own cultures that bring people together? Because for Durkheim, this is the way that we keep bringing that social solidarity back to our lives. And it can be very negative things like war that make us feel a bit more united. And even the current situation with COVID-19, we might feel physically separated from each other because we have to isolate, but actually an online community, which we're contributing to right now, you know, the online communities are really developing and accelerating and becoming bigger than they ever were. Okay, to bring our session to an end, I just wanted to ask whether we've moved beyond society. And one more sociologist that I will introduce you to is John Ury. And he is a much more modern sociologist, much more recent than Durkheim or Marx, thoroughly lived his life in the 20th century and died recently in 2016. But around the year 2000, he started to ask the question, have we moved beyond society? Because for John Ury, his argument was that actually it doesn't make sense to talk about societies in the form of nation states, as Durkheim said. It doesn't make sense because we can't run a country without impacting on other countries anymore. You're not isolated and separate in your own one country with no external influence anymore. And John Ury also said, it doesn't make sense to talk only about economic drivers, like Marx said. You can't influence your own economy without influencing other economies. You can't have a revolution without the rest of the world knowing about it. And for John Ury, he was part of the debate about whether or not we still have a society. And if we do, we have to maybe think about it in terms of a global society. And for him, the idea of global travel, communications, those networks that we're building all the time, that is what is our new society. That's what it looks like. And it can be quite hard for us to visualize because it's much more abstract. It's much more of an idea than a physical thing. It's not necessarily a country that we can see on a map. So when we're asking the question about society, some sociologists would say we no longer have a society, and other sociologists would say actually we've just moved from the nation state because of our travel and communications. We've become a much bigger society. We are still the same society, but much bigger. We have shared cultures, shared identities. Maybe the territory isn't so important after all. So we can go back to that initial definition. And what I would like to finish on is just reminding you of some of the key vocabulary that we've used this afternoon, or whatever the time is for you, that we've used today. And if you are interested in studying sociology, but also any other subjects, geography, environmental science, law, media, global politics, even the sciences, understanding society is going to be really important, because society is everything and everywhere and all around us. So some of the key vocabulary that we've used today is listed on the screen for you. And what I would like to use the last few minutes for is to ask you, again, just check what you understand. Can you type in the chat box any definitions for these particular words? And don't forget to tell me what word you're defining, so we can do a quick check on that. But also, if you would rather ask me specific questions, then you can pop those in the chat box as well. And just while you're thinking about that, I know that you probably think I've forgotten all about it, but I would just like to say well done, Pamola, for telling me that the Titanic was the enormous ship built in Belfast. It came to a very sad end because it sank under the ocean in 1912, but it is a very famous ship, and you can find out all about that online. But just for the last couple of minutes, if you would like to have a go at defining any of the words on the screen, or if you have any particular questions for me, I can deal with those now for you. Thank you. Okay, so we started to get a couple through. So solidarity, absolutely, it's all about unity. And for Durkheim, that idea of agreement, or can you remember the other word I used for agreement? Can you remember the word beginning with C that I used for agreement? We also have interdependence. Good, we're relying on each other to be specialised. And then, well done, Gavka, specialisation. Everyone has their own role, and it could be industry or technology. Well done. Everyone does something he or she, or even bigger social groups do best. Good. Inequality, hierarchy, social levels. Excellent. Yeah, the idea of inequality has a very negative feel to it. Remember that Durkheim said that hierarchies can be a positive thing, but for Marx, they only identified where conflict was taking place in society. Good. Yeah. Inequality is a lack of equality. You're quite right. Yeah. So earlier societies where we had access to the resources that we needed, that seems to have changed, and now not everyone can access the resources that they need. Okay, I will keep my eye on the chat box, people, because if you want to ask me anything or have a go at any of the other words, then I'm happy to sit here for a little bit longer. And what I would like to say while I've still got you all is thank you so much for coming along. I really hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that it has made you think about studying sociology or whatever subjects you want to do in the future, but keep in mind some of these key words, because they will come up whatever subject you're doing. And also I just wanted to say thank you to George for inviting me to do this session, and I hope you all stay really safe throughout the rest of this uncertain period.